started with a smell. Not perfume, not cologne, something worse. The scent of someone else's body on her skin. It was subtle at first. Something I noticed when I kissed her neck one evening after she came home late from dinner with the girls. A scent that didn't belong in our house, in our bed. It clung to her, like a stain she hadn't bothered to wash off. I didn't say anything that night. I let her tell her story. Let her smile at me like nothing was wrong. But my mind was already working, already picking apart the details. I asked her who was there. She rattled off names. Lisa, Jess, Rebecca. I nodded, pretending to believe her. But there was a hesitation. A split-second delay before she answered. A flicker of something in her eyes. Doubt burrowed into me like a parasite. 2 nights later, I decided to test her. I told her I had to stay late at work. An unexpected meeting. She barely reacted. Just mumbled something about ordering takeout and watching her shows. That was the first red flag. Normally, she'd complain, ask why I didn't push back against my boss, tell me to come home early. But this time, nothing. So I left. But I didn't go far. I parked 2 streets away, turned off my headlights, and waited. At 8:37 p.m., the lights in our house flickered off. At 8:42 p.m., she walked out the front door. Not in her usual sweatpants and hoodie, no, she was dressed up. Tight jeans, a low-cut top, hair done, lips painted red. She wasn't going to pick up takeout. My heart was hammering, my fingers tight around the steering wheel. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? Proof. She got into her car and drove off. I followed, keeping my distance. 15 minutes later, she pulled into the parking lot of a dimly lit bar on the edge of town. A place I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted as I watched her step out, check her phone, and walk inside. For a moment, I just sat there, my mind screaming at me to turn around, to drive home, to pretend I never saw any of this. But then he arrived. A black SUV rolled into the parking lot, parking 2 spaces away from her car. The driver stepped out. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a wedding ring. My eyes locked onto that small, silver band as rage curled through my veins like fire. Ashley walked up to him, smiling, and he placed a hand on her waist, leaned in, whispered something in her ear, and then they kissed. My body moved before my brain did. I was out of my car, crossing the lot, my vision red. But just as I reached them, just as I was about to grab her, she pulled away and laughed. Laughed, like this was some joke, like I wasn't standing right there, watching her. Then her eyes met mine, and her expression froze. "Jason?" she said, her voice sharp with surprise. The man beside her turned, confusion on his face. Then, realization. His posture stiffened, his eyes darting to Ashley. He knew who I was. Ashley's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist, her grip tight. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low, as if that could somehow control the situation. I stared at her, at this stranger wearing my wife's face. And then I turned to him. "You're married," I said. Not a question. A statement. His lips parted, but he didn't answer. I exhaled sharply, nodding to myself. I wasn't going to do this here. Not now. Not in some dirty parking lot. Instead, I looked at Ashley. Really looked at her. And I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that made her flinch. "I hope you had fun tonight," I said. "Because I promise you, this is the last time you ever will." Then I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, breathless and pale under the flickering neon lights. I didn't go home. Going home meant sitting in that house, in that bed where she had probably lain after being with him, smelling like him, touching me with the same hands that had just been all over another man. Going home meant giving her the chance to spin her lies, to cry, to twist the truth into something that would make me doubt what I had just seen with my own eyes. So instead, I parked in an empty lot and sat in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. My mind replayed the scene over and over, the way she smiled at him, the way she leaned into his touch so naturally, like this wasn't new, like this wasn't a mistake. I needed answers, and if Ashley wasn't going to give them to me, I'd get them myself. I pulled out my phone and opened Facebook. I didn't know his name, but I had seen his wedding ring. That meant there was a wife. I scrolled through Ashley's friends list, through her tagged photos, through anything that might lead me to him. It took almost an hour, but eventually, I found a picture. Ashley at a mutual friend's barbecue 6 months ago, smiling, holding a red cup, and standing just a few feet away, talking to another man, was him. And next to him, a woman. She was beautiful, dark hair, sharp eyes, a confidence in her posture that made her look untouchable. But she wasn't. Not to him. He had touched my wife, and I was willing to bet he had touched hers, too. Her name was Hannah Carter. I clicked on her profile, scrolled through her pictures. There were dozens of her and him together, vacations, family gatherings, anniversaries. A perfect life, carefully curated for social media. I hesitated for only a second before clicking message. I typed out one sentence. I think our spouses are having an affair. I stared at the words, my finger hovering over the send button. And then, before I could overthink it, I pressed it. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Then they disappeared. Then, nothing. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, and then my phone vibrated. Where are you? I felt my pulse in my throat. This woman didn't ask, what do you mean? Or, who are you? She already knew. I typed back my location. Her reply came fast. I'm on my way. I sat there watching the road, waiting. And then, 20 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled into the lot, headlights cutting through the darkness. The door opened and she stepped out. Hannah Carter. And I swear to God, the second our eyes met, I knew. This woman wasn't here to cry. She wasn't here to beg for answers. She was here for war. Hannah Carter didn't walk. She marched. Her heels clicked against the pavement, but there was nothing delicate or hesitant about it. This woman had purpose. Fury. The kind of anger that doesn't burn out, it builds. She reached my car and stopped, arms crossed, dark eyes scanning my face like she was trying to decide if I was worth her time. Then, without a word, she yanked open the passenger door and slid in. The scent of her perfume filled the car. Sharp, expensive, nothing like the sickly sweet smell Ashley wore when she was trying too hard. For a moment we just sat there, breathing in the same charged air. Then finally she spoke. How long? Her voice was ice, controlled. I swallowed. I don't know. I caught them tonight at a bar. She told me she was getting takeout. A humorless laugh escaped her lips. He told me he had a work dinner. She turned, finally looking at me. So, what now? I hadn't thought that far. I had expected screaming, denial, maybe even tears. But not this. Not a woman who looked like she had already accepted that her marriage was dead and was just waiting for the funeral. I want the truth, I said, clenching my jaw. I want to know how long they've been doing this. Where? When? I want every disgusting detail so I never second-guess myself again. She studied me for a moment, then nodded once. Decisive. Then we do this properly. No messy confrontations. No letting them weasel their way out. We gather evidence. We make it undeniable. And when the time is right, she exhaled slowly, her lips curling into something that almost resembled a smile. We burn them to the ground. A spark lit in my chest. A dangerous, reckless energy that I hadn't felt in years. I nodded. Hannah pulled out her phone. Give me your number. We're in this together now. I gave it to her without hesitation. She sent me a message immediately. When I checked my screen, it was a single word. War. I looked at her. She looked at me. And in that moment we weren't strangers. We were something else entirely. We were allies. The next morning I woke up to 3 missed calls from Hannah. No voicemail, no text, just 3 calls, spaced out over an hour. Something was wrong. I called her back immediately. She picked up on the first ring. Jason. Her voice was sharp, urgent. I found something. My stomach tightened. What? Meet me at the Perch Cafe. 15 minutes. She hung up before I could say anything else. I barely remembered getting dressed, barely remembered the drive. All I knew was that whatever Hannah had found, it wasn't small. When I walked into the cafe, she was already there, sitting in a corner booth, sunglasses on, coffee untouched. She slid a folder across the table as soon as I sat down. Open it. I did, and my whole body went cold. Inside were printed screenshots, Text messages, emails, conversations between Ashley and her husband, Mark. Some were casual, flirty, others weren't. And then, at the bottom, were pictures. Not just pictures of them together. Pictures inside my house. In my bed. The walls closed in around me. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could barely breathe. How did you? My voice cracked. Hannah took a sip of coffee, unbothered by the storm raging inside me. Mark's an idiot. Uses the same password for everything. I've suspected for months, but I never had proof until now. My fingers clenched around the pages, crumpling them. How far does this go? She leaned in, voice lowering. At least a year. Maybe more. A year. My mind reeled, sifting through every lie, every excuse, every moment I had trusted Ashley when I shouldn't have. The nights she came home late, the sudden new lingerie she claimed was for me, the weekends she spent visiting her sister. I felt sick. I looked up at Hannah, and for the first time, I saw something beneath her cold exterior: rage. They think they're untouchable, she said. Like we're fools. Like they'll get away with it. She exhaled slowly. But they won't. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat, forcing myself to focus. What's the plan? Hannah's lips curled into something dark. We don't just expose them, Jason. We ruin them. And in that moment I knew this wasn't just revenge. This was justice. Hannah was relentless, efficient, the kind of woman who didn't waste time screaming into the void. She sharpened her anger into a weapon and wielded it with precision. And now she was aiming it at our spouses. We sat in my car behind the cafe, the folder of evidence between us. My hands were still shaking from what I'd seen. Ashley, in our bedroom, tangled up with him. Hannah, on the other hand, was unervingly calm. We need more, she said, staring straight ahead. Screenshots and emails aren't enough. We need them in the act. On video. In public. Somewhere they can't deny it. The thought of seeing Ashley with him again made my stomach churn. But Hannah was right. If we wanted to take them down, we needed something they couldn't worm their way out of. I know where they meet, she continued. Mark has a second phone. Burner. He keeps it in his gym bag. I cloned it last night. I blinked. You cloned his phone? She glanced at me. I work in cybersecurity. He's an idiot. It took 10 minutes. Jesus. I let that sink in as she unlocked her own phone and pulled up a message thread. They're meeting at a hotel tomorrow night. The Red Fern Inn. Room 214. 7 p.m. I felt a rush of adrenaline so strong it nearly made me lightheaded. This was it. This was proof. Hannah turned to me. Are you in? I exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel. The image of Ashley and Mark together flashed in my mind, and suddenly, my hesitation was gone. I'm in. The next day was a blur. I called in sick to work. Couldn't eat. Couldn't think about anything except what was coming. At 6:30 p.m., I met Hannah in the hotel parking lot. She was already waiting, dressed in all black, her expression unreadable. Security cameras cover the hallways, she said. But I have a friend at the front desk. He's disabling them for 20 minutes. I stared at her. Do I even want to know how you pulled that off? No. Fair enough. We entered through the side door, keeping our heads down. The hallway smelled like cheap cleaning supplies and bad decisions. Room 214 was at the end of the corridor. We stopped in front of it, listened, and then we heard it. Muffled laughter. A moan. My blood turned to ice. Hannah pulled out her phone, hit record. Then she gave me a look. Ready? I nodded. And then I knocked. Silence. Then, footsteps. The lock clicked. The door cracked open and there she was. Ashley. Wrapped in a hotel robe. Her hair messy. Her lips swollen. Her eyes met mine. And in that instant, everything changed. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. Jason. Her voice was sharp, irritated. Like I was the one inconveniencing her. Behind her I saw movement. Mark stepping into view, shirtless. His expression shifting from confusion to sheer panic. And that's when Hannah shoved the door open and stepped inside. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just smiled. Hey honey, she said sweetly. Mind if we join you? For a second, nobody moved. Ashley was frozen in place, still gripping the edge of the door like she was trying to process the fact that her husband and her affair partner's wife were standing in her hotel room. Mark looked like he had just seen a ghost. His mouth opened and closed, his eyes darting between me and Hannah like he was debating whether to run or beg. Hannah stepped in first, calm and deliberate, her phone still recording. I followed, shutting the door behind me with a click. Ashley recovered first. "Are you insane?" she hissed, pulling the robe tighter around her body. "You can't just barge in here." Hannah let out a soft chuckle, tilting her head. "Oh, but you can sneak around behind our backs for a year?" She turned the camera toward Mark. "Smile, sweetheart. You're on candid cheating camera." Mark stepped forward, his hands raised. "Hannah, baby, that was the wrong move." Hannah's entire demeanor changed in an instant. She didn't slap him, didn't scream. Instead, she just laughed. A cold, cutting sound. Then, she did the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. She dropped her phone into his gym bag. Mark's whole body tensed. "What the hell are you doing?" Hannah smiled. "Oh, just returning your burner phone. You know, the one you used to text my husband's wife." She patted the bag like she was comforting a child. "You left it at home. So irresponsible." Mark paled. Ashley shifted beside him, suddenly uneasy. "Wait, what?" Ashley's eyes narrowed. "What burner phone?" And that was when I saw it. The first crack. Ashley didn't know. She had been perfectly fine lying to me, sneaking around with Mark, but she hadn't realized that Mark had been hiding things from her, too. "Oh," Hannah cooed, eyes glinting with wicked satisfaction. "You didn't know about that? Ha!" She feigned surprise, then turned to Mark, her voice suddenly sharp. "Why don't you tell her, Mark? Tell her who else you've been screwing behind her back." Silence. Mark's jaw clenched, his eyes pleading. "Hannah, don't." Ashley spun toward him. "What the hell is she talking about?" And just like that, the room exploded. Ashley started yelling. Mark started stammering. Hannah leaned against the dresser, watching it all unfold like it was a movie she had already seen the ending to. Me? I just stood there, watching my wife's world crumble around her. For the first time in months, I felt nothing for her. No love, no regret, no sadness, just satisfaction. Ashley turned to me, her eyes wild. "Jason, say something." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what? That I forgive you? That we can work through this?" I chuckled darkly. "Oh, sweetheart. No." Ashley's face twisted with something ugly. Anger. Desperation. "You can't be serious. Are you really going to throw away our marriage over this?" Hannah let out a dramatic gasp. "Oh, wow." She actually said it. She turned to Mark. "They always say it, don't they? Are you really gonna throw it all away? Like they weren't the ones who set the whole thing on fire." Ashley ignored her, stepping closer to me. "Jason, please." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "No, we're done." She flinched like I had hit her. "You don't mean that." I just smiled. "You'll see how much I mean it when the divorce papers hit your inbox." Mark groaned, rubbing his face. "Jesus, Jason. Let's not." Hannah threw up a finger. "Oh, you don't get to talk. In fact, you should probably start thinking about your divorce, too." Mark's face went slack. "Hannah, come on." But she wasn't listening anymore. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward us. Ashley and Mark both stared. What is that?" Ashley asked, her voice shaking. Hannah grinned. "Oh, just a lovely little email with all your texts, pictures, and videos. And guess who it's going to?" Ashley swallowed hard. "Who?" "Mark's boss," Hannah said sweetly. Silence. Then, "Hannah, and." Mark lunged for her phone, but she was already stepping back, hitting send. And just like that, everything they built together, their affair, their perfect little world, shattered into pieces. Mark's face drained of color as Hannah's finger lifted from the screen. He stared at her phone like she had just pulled the trigger on a loaded gun. "You're lying," he croaked. "You wouldn't." Hannah smirked, tilting her head. "Wouldn't I?" Ashley's panic hit next. Wait, Mark's boss? What does that have to do with anything?" Hannah turned to her, grinning like a predator toying with its prey. "Oh, sweetie, you really don't know who you've been screwing, do you?" Ashley blinked rapidly, shaking her head. What are you talking about? I chuckled darkly. Wow, Mark, you really didn't tell her. Mark shot me a look that was equal parts rage and desperation, but I wasn't feeling generous. Not anymore. I turned back to Ashley. Mark's boss? His wife's father. CEO of Carter and Myers Consulting. The guy who signs his paychecks. I paused, letting the realization hit her like a freight train. And if I had to guess, the guy who's about to fire his cheating, lying son-in-law. Ashley's mouth fell open. Mark took a sharp step toward Hannah, his voice rising. You're going to ruin my career over this? Hannah didn't even blink. Oh, I'm absolutely going to ruin your career over this. She leaned in, her voice dangerously low. You didn't just cheat on me, Mark. You disrespected me. You humiliated me. And now, you pay the price. Mark's hands curled into fists at his sides, his nostrils flaring. You don't get to destroy me just because you're mad. Hannah let out a laugh, full of genuine amusement. Oh, sweetheart, I'm not mad. She smiled. I'm thriving. Mark swore under his breath, pacing. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. Ashley, meanwhile, was still standing there, her eyes darting between us like she was trying to piece together a puzzle that was already finished. Then, finally, she turned to me, her voice small. Jason, you're really divorcing me? I stared at her, at the woman I had once loved, at the woman who had lied to my face for over a year, who had brought another man into our bed and never once thought I would find out. I let the silence stretch, let her feel it. Then I smiled. I already have a lawyer. Ashley swayed like I had struck her. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Mark scoffed. Oh, come on, Jason. Do you really want to go through all that hassle? Lawyers? Court? Splitting everything? I met his eyes, and for the first time in this entire disaster, I felt something close to amusement. Because he still thought I was the same weak, trusting man I had been yesterday. I wasn't. Oh, we won't be splitting everything, I said. See, Ashley signed a prenup. And guess what? I leaned in, savoring the moment. It has an infidelity clause. Ashley's breath hitched. Mark's eyebrows shot up. Wait, you mean, that's right? Hannah cut in, grinning like she was enjoying every second of this. She gets nothing. Ashley made a sound, half gasp, half choke. Jason, please, we can talk about this. No, I said simply. She reached for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. You made your choices, Ashley. Now you live with them. Tears welled in her eyes. Maybe they were real. Maybe they weren't. It didn't matter. I turned to Hannah. You ready to go? She exhaled, looking around the destroyed remains of their affair, then gave me a satisfied nod. Yeah, we're done here. And with that, we walked out of the room, leaving our cheating spouses drowning in the ruins of their own making. The moment we stepped out of the hotel room, a weight I didn't even know I was carrying lifted off my chest. The air felt cleaner. The world felt sharper. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't drowning in doubt and second-guessing in her. Ashley was behind me now, a ghost of a woman who had burned our marriage down with every lie, every stolen moment, every whisper to another man. And Mark? He was just collateral damage. But Hannah? Hannah was something else entirely. She walked beside me, heels clicking against the carpeted hallway, shoulders squared, phone still clutched in her hand like a weapon. And then, just as we reached the elevator, she let out a long breath and laughed. Not a soft chuckle, not a bitter scoff. A real laugh, sharp and electric. The sound of pure, unfiltered relief. I turned to her, arching a brow. You good? She grinned, shaking her head. Oh, I am so good. You have no idea. The elevator doors slid open, and we stepped inside. As soon as they closed, she let her head fall back against the wall, still smiling. I thought I was going to feel wrecked after this. Like, heartbroken, devastated, all that crap. She turned to me, eyes bright. But I don't. I exhaled, mirroring her relief. Yeah, same. A beat of silence. Then she smirked. Did you see Ashley's face when you told her about the prenup? I couldn't help it. I laughed. Oh, it was beautiful. Like watching a car crash in slow motion. Hannah wiped an imaginary tear from her eye. And Mark? Oh my God. The way he panicked when I sent that email. She mimicked his horrified expression. Like, Hannah, no. My career. I shook my head, still grinning. Yeah, well, guess he should have thought of that before he screwed his boss's daughter and his wife's best friend. Hannah let out another laugh, shaking her head. Men are so dumb. I gave her a pointed look. Ashley's not exactly a genius either. Touché. The elevator dinged. We stepped out, walking through the lobby like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't just detonated 2 marriages upstairs. As soon as we reached the parking lot, Hannah turned to me, crossing her arms. So, what now? I exhaled, glancing up at the night sky. Now? I go home, pack her stuff, serve her the papers. I turned to her. You? Oh, I'm about to make Mark's life hell. Her grin turned sharp. See, his company has a morality clause. And thanks to that lovely little email, Daddy Dearest is going to have him fired by morning. I whistled. Damn, you really don't play around. She shrugged. He played first. I just played better. A beat of silence. Then, she tilted her head at me. You want to grab a drink? I blinked. What? A drink? She gestured toward the road. There's a bar down the street. Nothing fancy, just cheap whiskey and terrible karaoke. Figured we might as well celebrate. I hesitated. Is that appropriate? Hannah rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Jason. I'm not trying to seduce you. I just think we deserve a damn drink after what we just pulled off. I considered that. She had a point. And honestly, a drink sounded really good right now. I smiled. All right, let's go. And with that, we drove off. 2 people who had just set fire to their old lives, ready to toast to the wreckage. The bar was the kind of place you went to disappear. Dim lights, cheap beer, a jukebox in the corner playing old rock songs nobody really listened to. Perfect. Hannah and I slid into a booth near the back, away from the crowd. The bartender barely glanced at us before setting down 2 glasses of whiskey. No small talk, no questions. Just the way I liked it. Hannah lifted her glass, smirking. To revenge. I clinked mine against hers. To freedom. We drank. The burn was smooth, warm, grounding. A reminder that I was alive. That I wasn't just some fool sitting at home, waiting for my wife to come back from another girl's night with the scent of another man on her skin. I exhaled, setting my glass down. So, what's next for you? Hannah swirled the whiskey in her glass, her eyes thoughtful. Mark's going to lose his job by morning. I'll probably kick him out after that. She smirked. Then I'll change the locks, drain the joint bank account, and send his mother the screenshots. I choked on my drink. Jesus. She shrugged. She loves me. She's going to be so disappointed in her son. I laughed, shaking my head. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Hannah leaned back, studying me. And you? What's the plan? I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. Divorce, obviously. Sell the house, start over. Maybe take a trip. I don't know. Just exist without feeling like a complete idiot. She nodded, then tilted her head. You ever think about why she did it? I frowned. What do you mean? I mean Ashley, Mark. People like them. Why cheat when you could just leave? She leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. I've thought about it a lot, and I think they just wanted more. More attention. More excitement. More of whatever they weren't getting from us. I scoffed. Well, congratulations to them. They got more. Yeah. And now they have nothing. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us lost in the wreckage of our marriages. Then, out of nowhere, Hannah grinned. You know what we should do? I raised an eyebrow. What? She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts. We should call them. I blinked. You want to talk to them? Not exactly. Her grin turned wicked. I just want to ruin their night. I hesitated only for a second. Then I leaned in, intrigued. All right, I'm listening. Hannah hit the dial button, put the phone on speaker. It rang. Once, twice, then, Hannah. Mark's voice, raw and anxious. She smirked. Hey, honey, where are you? He demanded. You just left and Oh, I'm just out with Jason. She shot me a mischievous look. We're having a great time. There was silence on the other end. Then, Ashley's voice, muffled in the background. Wait, Jason's there? With her. I grabbed my own phone. Hit dial. Ashley picked up instantly. Jason? Where are you? I smirked. Out with Hannah. Another silence. Then, Ashley's voice, sharp and accusing. Are you serious? Why wouldn't I be? I leaned back, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. I mean, if you and Mark get to sneak around, why can't we? Mark cursed under his breath. This isn't funny, Hannah. Oh, but it is, Hannah said, her voice dripping with amusement. Because the two of you are sitting in that pathetic hotel room, losing everything, while Jason and I are out here celebrating. Ashley made a frustrated noise. Jason, you're being ridiculous. You don't even like Hannah. Hannah snorted. Oh, honey, after tonight, he loves me. Ashley sucked in a sharp breath. You're trying to hurt me. I didn't even hesitate. Yes. Mark muttered something to Ashley, his voice low and urgent. Then, the line went dead. Hannah and I stared at the phones for a second, then at each other. Then we both burst out laughing. And for the first time in a long, long time, it felt good. The laughter faded slowly, leaving behind something lighter, something almost freeing. Hannah leaned back against the booth, exhaling, her fingers still wrapped around her glass. Well, she mused, tapping the rim. That was satisfying. I smirked. Think they're panicking? Oh, absolutely. She tilted her head. Ashley's probably pacing that hotel room, trying to figure out how to spin this in her favor. Mark's doing damage control, promising her it's not what it looks like, when we both know it's exactly what it looks like. I nodded. And tomorrow? He's going to wake up to no job, no marriage, and no way out. Hannah grinned. Poetic, isn't it? I rolled the whiskey glass between my palms, staring at the amber liquid. I should feel worse. Why? Because I loved her. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, like they belonged to a different man, a weaker one. I thought I'd be wrecked by all of this. I thought I'd be drinking myself unconscious, trying to erase it. But I'm not. I exhaled, shaking my head. I feel good. Hannah smirked. That's because you finally won. I considered that. For months I had been the fool, the blind husband, the one who didn't see the signs, who trusted when he shouldn't have. But now I was the one holding the cards. And Ashley? She had nothing. Hannah stretched, checking her phone. It's late. I glanced at the time. Past midnight. The night had slipped away without me even realizing it. She downed the last of her whiskey, then grabbed her coat. You heading home? I hesitated. Home. The place I had built with Ashley. The place I would be walking into alone for the first time since finding out. It should have felt heavy. Should have hurt. But instead, felt like mine again. I nodded, standing. Yeah. Gotta start packing up her stuff. Hannah grinned. Send me a picture when you throw it on the lawn. I chuckled. Deal. We walked to our cars in comfortable silence, the cool night air buzzing with something that felt dangerously close to victory. Just before getting into her car, Hannah paused, turning to me. Hey, Jason. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah. She hesitated just for a second. Then, with a smirk, she said, We make a pretty good team. I smirked back. Yeah, we do. And as I drove away, leaving behind the wreckage of a marriage I no longer mourned, I realized something. I wasn't just moving on. I was winning.